Hello there, this is David Cohn, Senior Content Manager at 4D Technologies, where I develop some of the CADLearning courses. Specifically, one of the courses I work on is AutoCAD. And I'm here today with KaDe King. KaDe, it's a year since we last got together like this. And of course, that means that there's a new release of AutoCAD, AutoCAD 2019. So when I first looked at this release, I didn't think there was a whole lot there. Of course, I was looking at a very small picture. Then Autodesk announced the new product, and they gave us a whole lot more to talk about. So why don't you start telling us what all got released on March 22nd?
All right. Well, Autodesk announced that they were shifting the AutoCAD product to a new tool that they're taglining as One AutoCAD. And One AutoCAD is AutoCAD with specialized tool sets. And the specialized tool sets gives us access to all the AutoCAD verticals under one umbrella. So AutoCAD architecture, mechanical design, mapping, all of those various tools are available to us now. The only one that's not included in that is the Civil 3D, and that has been rebranded as just Autodesk Civil 3D. So that's kind of a big deal, I think, for a lot of customers. I think the biggest thing on that is that, you know, you're basically getting all those products and you can use whatever you need under the one license. One of the things to note is that existing subscription customers who already have either an AutoCAD license or like one of the verticals can simply ask Autodesk to switch them to AutoCAD, to the One AutoCAD, the AutoCAD with the specialized tool sets, and there is no charge to switch that over. You basically get that for the price you're at now until the end of your contract. The other thing that I really love about this is the network license flow through, and here's what I mean by this. Customers who had, let's say they had a 10-seat of AutoCAD electrical, a 10-seat of AutoCAD mechanical, maybe a 10-seat of AutoCAD map per se, not that they're going to have those three combinations, but then maybe they had like a suite, like infrastructure design suite or one of those suites. One of the problems they'd have is that if they launched just plain AutoCAD, it could not flow through all of their licensing. So it wouldn't take an AutoCAD map and it wouldn't take an electrical, but it would take a mechanical and it would take their suite. So they really didn't have complete flow through of all their licenses. If they were to switch licensing and move everything to One AutoCAD, then they would have plain AutoCAD or any of the AutoCAD verticals available on any license. So it really does give people more access to licensing, or really can help on those network or multi-user licenses. So there's a lot of advantages there. Some of the other things to note is that you know, with the new component, you know, there will be some, you'll want to pay attention when your subscription or your maintenance is due for renewal. So if you're planning on moving over from maintenance to subscription this year, you'll want to really pay attention to what you've got, not just move it over, but think about moving your verticals to that One AutoCAD or moving your plain AutoCAD to that One AutoCAD. Okay,
but let's talk about the pricing for a while now. So what Autodesk essentially told us was that the cost of AutoCAD, and correct me if I've got this wrong, essentially goes up $10 a month or $100 a year over what core AutoCAD was before. But for that now you get access to all 7 of these tools.
Yeah, that's correct. So I mean, basically what people are getting is the vertical price. Like if you bought like an AutoCAD map previously, it would be the similar price that what you'd have. So you're basically paying for a vertical price, but you get all the verticals in one.
Well, when I looked at it, there were a couple of those verticals that actually cost quite a bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising actually that what they've given us, it's actually quite a value.
Right. I mean, there were at least 1 or 2 of the verticals that are now bundled in there that literally cost $100 more per month than what One AutoCAD is now going to cost them. So for those people, it's a considerable savings.
Yeah, it is for sure. And I think what they did was they picked kind of the lowest vertical cost that they had and then went with that cost.
Right.
So and it's hard to say what's going to happen, in the future, but it's just something to make a decision on. To have to go up to one AutoCAD, they can just stay on the AutoCAD. And when their contract is over, they'll probably have to move to the new one. But as far as what they're doing, they can just stay on it. Anybody on maintenance, of course, can continue to stay on maintenance and not change their stuff if they don't want to. But there's some pretty, serious price implications for staying on maintenance every year as it goes on. So at some point, it may become unreasonable to stay on maintenance.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit now, just so everybody knows what's really included now in one AutoCAD, because in addition to core AutoCAD, we're getting AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD Electrical, and I'm counting off on my fingers here because there's 7 pieces, AutoCAD Map 3D, AutoCAD Mechanical, AutoCAD MEP, AutoCAD Plant 3D, and AutoCAD Raster Design.
That's correct, and I think the biggest one is that Plant 3D. That Plant 3D is a pretty hefty, that used to be a pretty big price tag because you could only buy it in the Plant Design Suite for the last little bit. And that's actually, you actually get Plant 3D and P&ID with that because P&ID is included in Plant 3D. So there's kind of a little subset there that some people may not be aware of.
Oh, so I was unaware of that. P&ID is included in Plant 3D?
Yeah, it's just a workspace that you switch to. So, but it's part of that product. They merged those two together, so it's actually 2-in-1 on that one too.
Okay, so I was unaware of that. And then there's actually a couple of other extra bonuses that got tossed in here because Autodesk also came out with 2 new products, essentially. We now have an AutoCAD web app and an AutoCAD mobile app. And these are not just reworkings of AutoCAD 360 and AutoCAD WS. These are full-fledged applications that are built on top of the core software that is AutoCAD Windows.
That's right, and I mean and so you get full access to that with the subscription. Right. You do need to be a subscription customer. Maintenance customers aren't going to get entitled to that, so there's some benefits to switching to subscription on that. So just to clarify that, make sure everybody knows.
And this one's also interesting because it's not just AutoCAD. Those tools are also going to be available to people that are using AutoCAD LT 2019 if they're on subscription. If
they're on subscription, that's correct. So it's kind of a big deal to be able to have access to that, and then kind of like almost like a mini AutoCAD collection right here, right?
Yep.
They're not calling it the AutoCAD collection, but that's pretty much what it is.
Right, and then to make all this work, Autodesk, and again, this came as a surprise to a lot of us because those of us that were working with the beta, this didn't show up until the final build of the beta was when we first found out that there's a new feature called Save to Web and Mobile. And so you now have these 2 tools, Save to Web and Mobile and Open from Web and Mobile. The first time you go to run one of these, you're going to get prompted to install a Save to Web and Mobile extension. So Autodesk released this special extension that when the first time you use either the Save to Web and Mobile or the Open from Web and Mobile command, it'll ask you to install this extension. And then once you save it, once you've installed it, you've got the option then of making any desktop files available to the AutoCAD web and mobile apps.
That's a really convenient feature. So customers who use those web and mobile apps and who use that online and that they're going out to a work site, they can just quickly save those files. It's a little more convenient than having to dig around to find the tools.
Right. So this essentially means that anybody working out in the field is going to be able to open up their web and mobile app on their phone, on their tablet, wherever they've got an internet connection, and they can bring up drawings and not just look at them, but they can actually work on those drawings on their tablet or their phone in the field, save the files back, and then when they get back to their office, they can open those same files back up on their desktop. And then if they want, so let's make clear, they're opening up a version of the file that's stored in the cloud. So if they then want to save the changes, they do have to then overwrite the copy to save those changes back to the local copy of those drawing files.
And if you're going to be offline while you're out in the field, you can store those files to your local device as well. So they have an offline mode on those too, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of cool. Like, like most other mobile apps for your devices. One of the other cool things that I liked about the mobile app is, you all know how tiny it is to use something on your phone. If you press down on the screen, or you're using a stylus or whatever, it has a magnifier that pops up.
Yep.
And then it shows you what you're seeing a little bit closer up, because you're on a tiny little phone or something. It's kind of neat. So makes it a lot easier to use the tool when it has the little mobile little magnifier there. So.
Okay, well, that's what's in the specialized tool set, this AutoCAD 1. Let's talk about some of the features that have actually been added into the core AutoCAD, and therefore, of course, are going to be available across those 7 other applications as well. The one that I'm absolutely head over heels for right now is the DWG Compare. I mean, this it seems like something that should have been in there for a long time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a feature very similar to this that was available in AutoCAD Architecture for a while now.
Yeah.
So it's not like they suddenly invented this thing. But what DWG Compare enables you to do is, if you've got a drawing open and you fire off DWG Compare, then the open drawing by default becomes one of the 2 drawings that you're going to be comparing. But it essentially allows you to open up 2 versions of a drawing and quickly have the program show you what's different about those 2 drawings. So it'll show you what exists in one drawing that doesn't exist in the other, and what's common. And you can control the colors by default. The first drawing shows up in green, the second drawing shows up in red. So anything that's in the first drawing and not in the second will be highlighted in green. Anything that's in the second that's not in the first will be highlighted in red. And anything that's common to the 2 will display in a dark gray. And it makes it very easy to quickly find what's different about 2 drawings. You can save that because it essentially creates a 3rd drawing. It's a lot like Microsoft Word if you're comparing Word documents, where it creates a new document based on the 2 and shows you what's different about them. But the really cool feature is that it creates revision clouds automatically.
Yeah, I like that part. I've seen that in there, and I thought, I think they really did a good job in building this tool. It seems really well thought out.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of you can tell. The one way you can tell when they've really done a good job with an AutoCAD command or an AutoCAD tool is there's a whole ton of system variables that go along with it. And this one is no stranger to system variables. I think when I looked at the list, there was like 10 system variables that work with it to make sure that it works right.
Yeah, just what we needed was a whole lot more system variables. The good news is, though, that when you use this tool, you do get a contextual ribbon. And all of those system variables are hidden behind various buttons and controls in that contextual ribbon. So it does make it very easy. You can decide which drawing is going to be at the foreground and which drawing is going to be in the background. You can change, as I said, the colors that it's using to display the various components. You can also toggle the display of text in both of those drawings and hatch patterns in both of those drawings on and off. And I believe by default, text is toggled on, so you can see text that's different between the 2 drawings, but hatch patterns are toggled off, but you can toggle them on and off at will. And then you can also control both the shape that AutoCAD is using to create those revision clouds, so they can either be rectangular or be created using polylines. You can control the color of those revision clouds, and in fact, in the drawing that gets created by comparison, those revision clouds get put on their own layer automatically. And you can control how much overlap there is. So you could have, if you've got a bunch of changes that are closely clustered, you can have one revision cloud that surrounds them, or you can move a slider, which effectively changes a system variable, and break them all up into individual revision clouds. And then there's also a series of little arrows that when you click on them, AutoCAD automatically zooms right into those revision clouds. So you not only see them in the context of the large drawing, but you can immediately use this tool to jump right to any of the changes between those drawings. You don't have to use the roller wheel and constantly be zooming in and out. You can just toggle from one to the next as you review your drawing and determine, is the change that you made valid.
I can really see this tool becoming a regular part of people's workflow.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, excellent tool.
Well, another thing that they added in here is a feature called shared views.
Yeah, the shared views is very powerful. It's similar. They had a feature that was kind of like this, but didn't have the capabilities in the previous version. So the advantage, if you use the old tool, there was a tool where you could say, hey, I want to kind of publish out to the web, and it would give you a temporary link, and you could give that to someone. Now, what they've done with this that makes it so much better is that it's fully controllable what you're sharing.
Right.
So you can choose whether it's 2D views or 3D views. You can choose whether they can see object properties, whether they see all your layout views and your model view, really controlled. You give it a specific name. You have to have your Autodesk account. You have to be logged in,
Right.
or else it won't let you do it, but you're there if you have your Autodesk account logged in. The other thing that I liked about this was you have a new palette that fully controls these shared views, and it'll tell you every shared view you've created in this palette, regardless of when it was, and it tells you the date and time, and then you can control that. Now, by default, those shared views, here's the way it works. You create the shared view, you choose what you want to share, and it depending on how much time that takes to create, it'll take, usually a minute or two, and it'll generate a link that will be available on the internet. And
Right.
It'll take you to that as soon as it's ready, but it can also send you an email and notify you of when it's done. So if you're doing something that's a little bit larger, you can just wait for that email, send the link to your client, and it has easy tools from inside the shared view palette to share those and work with those and get those links. The other thing that's nice about that is by default, this is 30 days. It's going to go away after 30 days, but you can go in and just delete the ones you don't want anymore.
Right.
So as soon as this is done,
or extend it for another 30 days.
Yes, you can. You can hit extend and give it more time. It's just a nice way. Here's something that I think is really nice. How many of you have customers that really don't have the ability to install a viewer? Okay, maybe they can't install a DWG viewer, but they need to see this. You need to interact with them in a DWG format. They don't have the ability to install any kind of plugin for a GoToMeeting even, maybe.
Right.
So you could use this tool, and it's completely browser-based. So all they have to have is an internet browser. You can go there, and you guys can look at the same file and pan and zoom around inside the file. So extremely helpful to work with those clients that maybe don't have that flexibility. But you have those nice shared views, and you're all ready to go. So very easy.
And again, and they're not just zooming and panning. It's not. You can actually annotate these. You can mark them up. And the thing that I liked is when someone adds a markup, you see all of those comments and markups inside that palette, inside of AutoCAD or in the online viewer. So again, whenever someone else that you're collaborating with makes any kind of a comment on the view that you've shared, you're notified of that. And that palette in AutoCAD is, again, retaining a complete history of what's been commented and all of the comments that have been made.
Yeah, really, really powerful tool. So another kind of number 2 one there. I think the drawing compare is absolutely the biggest feature. But this tool is kind of the next one, right? It's the next big thing that on the list of things to look at. So,
well, another one that I actually was really impressed with is this whole idea now of the tool. There's now a tool in AutoCAD that will allow you to create a named view and immediately insert that named view as a viewport on a paper space layout. I've got to admit that I was kind of a Luddite when it came to sheet sets. Sheet sets have been around forever. And it wasn't until I finally sat down and said, we've never covered sheet sets to any real extent in our CAD learning courses, and they really deserved an entire chapter in our AutoCAD course. And so last year I sat down, I worked with Heidi Hewitt at Autodesk to come up with a good methodology for teaching people how to use sheet sets. And once I understood and could really leverage the power of sheet sets, I found that working with named views was really important, because if you've got named views, they're not just a good tool for jumping around within a drawing, but they become incredibly useful once you're assembling a set of documents, particularly if you're using sheet sets. And so to me, one of the other highlight new tools in AutoCAD 2019 is both the ability to quickly place a named view onto a paper space layout by selecting that view from a gallery. And that's one of the key things. You now have a visual way of seeing exactly what's in that named view as you go to grab it. But not only does AutoCAD now enable you to place that named view onto a layout very easily, but as you go to place it, it automatically looks at the size of the layout that you're placing it on and scales the view so that it is no greater than half the size of the sheet. It automatically applies a scale as you're placing it, but you can right-click at that point and change the scale if you don't like the scale it's chosen. And then when you place that view on the sheet, it automatically locks that viewport. So if you think about what you used to have to do to place a view on a paper space layout, it was a multi-step process. First, you had to draw the boundary, either on the fly, you're creating a rectangle or a polygonal viewport, or first you drew an object and converted that object to a viewport. Then you had to scale what was in there. Then you had to move it where you wanted it on the sheet. Then you had to lock it. This tool does all of that in a single step.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
The more I worked with it, the cooler I thought it was.
And one thing I really like with this is when you select your viewport, there's a drop-down arrow right in the center of your viewport to switch the scale factor too. So you don't have to go hunting for the viewport scale factor down in the bottom right corner, which I've always liked that tool, but let's just make it even better, right? So let's put it right where we want it, right when we need it.
And we've had these contextual grips for quite a while. So it's really surprising that this one wasn't there, because there's actually two grips that got added. Right. You've got the triangular grip now for selecting the scale, but there's a little square grip in the center that makes it very easy to just grab that and move the viewport. Before you had to select it, right-click and choose move, or start the move command. Why not be able to do it using grip editing?
I'm a huge fan of contextual grips across the board. I love these things, especially for like dimensions and polylines, and I can't wait to see them implemented even more as Autodesk moves on with these. I love to see Autodesk do even more with them. So,
And then I've got to jump in on it. There's one more feature, again, something that initially looks really subtle, but then I realized that people that hadn't been using this or had been using it and had to remember a whole litany again of system variables are going to love the fact that now there are additional controls in the layer properties manager. So I'm sure that there's people that have used AutoCAD for years that don't even realize that there is a layer properties manager settings tool.
It's true.
And it opens up a dialog box, and that dialog box used to be a relatively small dialog box with a few settings in there, like do you want the changes you make in Layer Properties Manager to also be reflected in the layer pull down on the home ribbon. So there was a control in there, which of course, all of these checkboxes and radio buttons and color selectors in any of these dialog boxes typically are a front interface to these system variables. So there were system variables in AutoCAD for years. If you think about what you do when you're working particularly with external references. So, most of us use external references to assemble sets of drawings. And if you brought drawings in as external references, then they show up in the Layer Properties Manager. And then maybe in the original drawing that's being referenced, the color or the line type assigned to a particular layer wasn't what you really wanted in your host drawing. And so people would go into using the Layer Properties Manager and change the color or change the line type assigned to that layer in the Xref. And then there's system variables that determine, is that change that you just made going to be retained the next time you open up that drawing? So there was a system variable for that. And then how do you handle layers Or how do you handle objects on layers when the objects themselves were not drawn using the by layer color property or line type property? So now inside of this expanded Layer Properties Manager settings dialog box, you've got checkboxes to retain the settings and to treat all layers as if the objects on those layers were drawn by layer. So you now have a graphical interface to control that, and new tools in the Layer Properties Manager. So if overrides have been applied to a layer, any visual property of a layer, line type, color, transparency, line weight, if any override has been applied to a layer property associated with a layer, either coming in from an Xref, or you've applied a layer property override to a layer that's now in a viewport in a paper space layout, you can quickly see this because there's a new icon that shows up in the status column. And there's also shaded backgrounds that show up over the layer name and whichever properties have been overridden. And you can even apply a different color background to help you understand if the override is based on a change you made to a viewport or a change you made to an Xref. When you hover your cursor over any element inside the Layer Properties Manager that has been overridden, you now get a tooltip that shows you both what the original property of that value was and the overridden property. And if you right-click, you've got tools for resetting that property back on a property-by-property basis, on a layer-by-layer basis, or across all of the layers in that drawing. So it's really a very powerful tool, again, that was added quite subtly to AutoCAD 2019. And I think people are going to find this one really, really useful.
And I'm hoping that more people will notice this stuff is there because of those interface components, right? The icons, the hovering techniques, all of those things will help people realize that these features have been added. And then, hopefully they'll dig in and find that settings menu and take a look at it. So. Right,
because I mean, we've got to be somewhere near around 1,200 system variables at this point.
Right, too many. You've got to look for these things in a dialog box somewhere at some point.
Yeah.
Kind of another thing that kind of relates to this, and this is one of those little things but goodies, is Autodesk's new Xref layer system variable. I love this thing. Basically, there's a new Xref layer system variable, and you can tell it which default layer you want all your Xrefs to go on. So that if the user is going to attach an Xref, they don't have to worry about switching the current layer before they attach the Xref. You just set it in your template file as which layer is your default Xref layer, and you are good to go from that moment on. It's like we have one for hatch layer, we have one for dim layer, now we have one for Xref layer. Right,
because how many drawings have you opened up from clients and stuff is missing because they didn't even realize that when they inserted an Xref, it got attached to whatever layer was current when they inserted it, didn't even pay attention to what layer was current when they inserted it, and now they've frozen that layer and they're wondering why half their drawing disappeared.
Yeah, I love that, right? So I think this is a great variable. I can't wait to see more of these layer system variables, to be perfectly honest. I'd love to see Autodesk go even a step farther with this, maybe with some text layers and stuff like that. So,
well, if you think about it, I mean, I started with the very early days of AutoCAD. I mean, when I started with AutoCAD, there were literally 28 commands in the program. So when people say, well, how do you know so much about the program? I said, well, I didn't have to eat the whole elephant at once.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, when I started using this, it was just a little tiny elephant.
Yeah, it was a tiny piece. It didn't have that many commands.
But one of the things I did early in my career was to create AutoCAD add-ons, and one of the add-ons I created was a system to automate AutoCAD for architecture, where when you did things, it automatically put everything on the correct layer. So much of the customization that's been added to AutoCAD over the years was to simply do things like that. When you insert a door, make sure it's on the door layer. When you insert a wall, draw a wall, make sure it's on the wall layer. I mean, of course, now we've got other programs that are specialized for working in those particular verticals. Right. But yeah, there are so many things in AutoCAD that can be automated. As you say, a couple of years ago, they added the automatic dimensioning layer. A few years before that, when they modified the way hatches work, you had the ability to designate what your hatch pattern layer was going to be. And AutoCAD, same thing now with the Xref layer. And if that layer does not exist in the drawing, simply by virtue of having assigned that layer the first time you create an Xref, AutoCAD will automatically create that layer if it doesn't already exist and attach the Xref to that layer.
Yeah, it seems like such a small thing, but it's actually a very big deal, I think, for a lot of people.
Let's talk about a couple of final features in AutoCAD 2019, because every time Autodesk updates the program, they go in and they tweak stuff under the hood that we really don't see, but as you start working with the program, you definitely feel it, and that's in terms of performance. And so this release, I think, almost more than a lot of others, there's a lot of under-the-hood performance improvements, particularly 3D graphic performance, 2D graphic performance, and plot and preview performance. So I've noticed the 2D performance changes almost immediately. A lot of things that had previously required a redraw or a regen seem to happen almost instantaneously at this point. And as I'm navigating around in a 3D drawing, it just feels a whole lot quicker. Now, I know Autodesk has recorded scripts where they're manipulating a drawing in an earlier version of AutoCAD and in 2019 and showing these side by side. So they've actually quantified this in ways that we can see it. You've seen some improvements now in plot and preview performance as well, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've seen huge improvements in plot and preview. One that I noticed particularly, and this is more of a 2D enhancement, but when you're dealing with raster images in your file, it's about twice as fast as it used to be. So that one's actually a pretty big deal. But certainly, probably the biggest thing with plot and preview was that if you had any missing fonts in your drawing file, there would be some hangups when you went to do a plot and preview. And now they've eliminated those. Basically just told it, okay, it ignores the fact that it's missing instead of hanging on that. So that's kind of nice.
Okay, another change that was made, and this is really one that people will see the first time they open up AutoCAD, is that the icons themselves have been changed. So yeah. Autodesk has said now, I think for 3 releases, that they're working on making AutoCAD completely compatible with 4K displays. So these are displays that display at 2160 as that second number. So a 2K display is essentially high def. That's a display that has a vertical aspect of 1080. And now 4K display is a display that has a vertical aspect of 2160. So what Autodesk has done is they've gotten rid of a lot of the 3D icons. They've flattened out the icons, the things that you see on all the various buttons, and made 2 different sets. So AutoCAD will see now when you start it up whether you're working on a 2K display or a 4K display, and automatically load the correct icon set. Everything looks much clearer on screen. Even again, one of these subtle little things, but when you've got stuff toggled now on the status bar, anything that's toggled on appears with a consistent blue background. Whereas in the past, some of the buttons, you had to look, there was, when you had something hidden or isolated, you had, one little circle there on that icon turned blue. Now the whole button background turns blue. So it's very clear at a glance when you look at the status bar to tell whether something's been toggled on and off. But the big thing is, I don't know how, I'm getting old, I'll admit it. I have a real tough time reading anything on a 4K display, but it was even more frustrating when suddenly you get a dialog box and all of the text looks like it's in like 2-point type. So I haven't found any more of those in AutoCAD 2019. I've been working with the software now. As I say, I alluded to, I got started on the beta, so I've been working with it for a number of months. And I have not found a dialog box thus far that had type that was so small that I couldn't read it. So it looks like we may finally have made the transition 100% to 4K compatibility. Wonderful. Anything else you can think of that we haven't touched on?
A couple of minor little things. In the standards checking tool, they made it so that if you are running the standards checker and you have custom line types, it will now flag those it had a problem with understanding custom line types previously. If there was more than one custom line type definition in the drawing, the standards checker wouldn't work on it. It just didn't. It would ignore those components. So they fixed that. And then on object selection, when you're doing like a crossing window or a fence, and you were doing trimming or extending of lines that were not on the current UCS plane, they've now resolved that so that actually works even if you're not on the current UCS plane, so that you can use a crossing window or fence selection when you're trimming or extending on those.
Okay.
So a couple of little minor things, but you know, maybe somebody will be like, "Hey, it works now!" Woo!
Right, because the last iteration they actually fixed object selection, so you could continue to select things and retain the selection set, even if some of the objects were initially off screen and you moved to that location.
Right, if you pan or zoom during your trim or extend, it wouldn't mess. It would mess with your trim and extend previously to 2018, and then they fixed that, so it's kind of nice. This kind of goes along with that, but you know, dealing with things that are not on the current UCS plane.
Yeah, so again, to kind of wrap up, when I first looked at one of the early betas and looked at the feature set of what was going to be planned for 2019, I'm going, wow, there's like 6 new features. There's a lot there in those 6 new features, and really a lot more than those 6 new features. I think the majority of customers are going to be very, very happy with this release. Agreed
completely. Awesome.
Well, KaDe, thanks for joining us this morning. I know that you've got a pretty tight schedule. You're on site working with a client this week, but I think our viewers are going to find this very, very useful.
So I hope so. Thank you.